Okay, gang, we're going to be in John chapter 8 this morning. John chapter 8, this is a continuation of our series, I Am. So those of you that are just tuning in, we're looking at the I Am statements of Jesus in the book of John. And this is a good one. Jesus getting sideways yet again with the Pharisees and saying the kind of things that get you publicly executed. All right, so if you want to follow along, you can up on the screen. You can touch the Bibles that are in front of you. That's still okay, or on your phone. It's all good. It's all cool. John chapter 8. If you want to follow along, we're going to jump right in because we have quite a bit to cover and not a lot of time to cover it. So we're going to pick up in verse 12 with the I am statement focus for today. Verse 12. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. The Pharisees challenged him. Here you are appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid. Jesus answered, even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid. For I know where I came from and where I am going. But you have no idea where I come from or where I'm going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgment on no one. But if I do judge, my decisions are true because I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law it is written that the testimony of two witnesses is true. I am one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me. Then they asked him, where's your father? You do not know me or my Father, Jesus replied. If you knew me, you would know my Father also. He spoke these words while teaching in the temple courts near the place where the offerings were put. Yet no one seized him because his hour had not yet come. Now this is what's interesting, what the Pharisees then attempt to do. And I'll just summarize two more sections before we pick things up a little bit later in John chapter 8. But it's interesting that their strategy with Jesus, once he makes his proclamation that I am the light of the world, in other words, I will shine light on darkness. The world is dark, and where I am and what I shine light on will be subdued. All that is dark will be brought into the light. I am the light of the world. I am this agent with which God is going to work. In fact, God is who I am. He would reveal later in this little dialogue, okay? So it is this perspective that Jesus has, okay, that what is at stake is life and death. Very clear set of priorities, life or death, that's it. And he's now up against a group of people that had a lot of plans in place, a lot of infrastructure in place, a lot of investment in place on how society and culture was supposed to be run and operate. And Jesus is a threat to all of that. He's a threat to their way of life. He's a threat to their income, the economy, the way that they saw it. He is this battering ram with this message that is wholeheartedly being rejected. And their response to Jesus is interesting because their strategy in their response is actually the exact same strategy that Satan took with Jesus when he's in the wilderness being tempted. Go figure. The first thing that they come back to Jesus with when he says he's the light of the world is they question his power and his identity. You'll always know when you're up against something demonic whenever one of its moves is to question your identity and your worth and your value, or give you worth or value based on your identity. Sound familiar? No? Well, so that's what goes on. And let me tell you what's interesting about the culture we live in right now. I could take any subset group of people right now, however you want to break people down. This is an extraordinary time that we're living in. So be awake, pay attention, and experience it, drink it in, because this is what's crazy. You could take any one group of people right now and ask them, how are they feeling? What are they thinking? To a group, they will tell you, to some degree or another, I feel attacked. I feel under siege. I have this this thing going on in my gut and in my stomach. I'm worried about my family, worried about the economy. And it's fascinating because you wouldn't maybe think that, maybe you haven't thought that, but every last group is feeling that way. So they go after the identity. See, this is what Satan tried to do with Jesus, and that's what they do. Then the next move that Satan made with Jesus in the wilderness is he actually went after his relationship to the Father. Well, if the Father really loves you, if he actually cares, then he's going to take care of you. Oh, okay, maybe he doesn't have the power to take care of you, but he has the heart to love you. Maybe he has the power to take care of you, but he doesn't have the heart to love you. That's kind of the game that Satan tries to play with Jesus, and it's the exact same game they try to play with Jesus as well as the Pharisees. Interesting. And Jesus at one point calls them out on this. This is why he looks at them and says, your father, Jesus would say in this little exchange, is Satan, the father of lies. Jesus would say, your native tongue, okay? Satan's native tongue, when he speaks, it's lies, deception, half-truth, right? If I put 1% of poison and 99 parts water, you're still drinking poison. So Jesus hits him back pretty hard, and things then pick up in verse 48. It says this in verse 48. The Jews answered him, aren't we right in saying that you are a Samaritan and demon-possessed? What are they saying? Aren't we right in saying that you're a half-breed, second-class citizen in our hierarchy? You're a nobody. You're a Samaritan. And aren't we right in saying that your power, where it really comes from, is from the very gates of hell? You see what they're going after? They're going after everything that Jesus is in his identity. They're knocking down his family lineage. They're knocking down who his mother was. They're knocking down that he's from the house and the line of King David. And they're saying that all of his power comes from Satan himself. Jesus will go on to say, I'm not possessed by a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. I am not seeking glory for myself, but there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Very truly I tell you, whoever obeys my word will never see death. At this they exclaimed, now we know that you are demon-possessed. Abraham died, and so did the prophets. Yet you say that whoever obeys your word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are? Jesus replied, if I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. My Father, whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you. But I do know him and obey his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. You are not yet 50 years old, they said to him, and you have seen Abraham. Very truly I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. Just so you know, the name that they would not speak is Yahweh. Yahweh, the name I am. Jesus drops that little truth nuke right in the middle of this exchange. When Jesus is saying, I had these conversations. I have been speaking since the beginning of time. And they're still caught up on, you're like 30 years old. How did that happen? We don't get it. And he goes, no. Since the beginning of time, I am. What is he saying? This holy and righteous, this great and powerful God, I am God, right? At this, they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. I want to talk to you just about perspective. Perspective, life and death, okay? Because I realize you get 6 days, okay, and 22 and a half hours of a constant bombardment, okay? Sickness, disease, death, what's the COVID rate, where are we at now, is there another strain, hospital, yada, yada. So I hope you can understand where I'm kind of coming from is I get like this one shot in your world to begin to combat that to the best that I can as a follower of Jesus, okay? So we have perspective, we have life, and we have death. We have our plans, right? Everybody's plans for 2020 worked out perfectly, right? You went everywhere you wanted to go. You did everything you were going to do. Graduations went off without a hitch. Birthdays were awesome, right? Right? You got that raise you were hoping for, right? Family got together for Thanksgiving. Shall I go on? Okay. So let's talk about the plans. My favorite example of the most incredible plan by human hands in my mind, it's got to be top 5 ever, okay? It was this little operation, maybe you heard of it, called D-Day. D-Day. There was a lot that went into the planning, and younger folks, you may be shocked. They did all of this without sending a single text. Not one email fired off, okay, in this little thing, okay? They had to go across the English Channel, and they had the whole thing lined out perfectly, okay? It was us, right? It was the British and the Canadians. And had the whole thing. First, we amassed 1.5 million people, okay, in England. That must have been a party, right? All of these guys, everywhere you look, there's Americans that had to have driven them crazy over there, okay? So they got 1.5 million. And here's what began to happen. Phase 1, they had it perfectly planned, okay? Phase 1, we're going to drop a bunch of people on enemy lines, behind enemy lines. And they're going to cut off all the tanks and all the support. It's going to work out beautifully. That's what we're going to do, okay? And then they're like, Phase 2, we're going to bring in bombers. And they're just going to bomb the snot out of everything, okay? And not only are they going to knock out all the defenses on the coast, they're going to build all these big craters from the bombs so our guys can hide in the craters. It'll be great. This will work out perfectly, okay? And then the final phase was we're going to have a whole bunch of ships come over, put a whole bunch of people in those ships, and then we're going to invade and we're going to save the day. Perfect plan, okay? You want to talk about nuanced timing, precision, life on the line. They had a plan, a great plan. Except life happens. Evil happens. Conflict happens. If you aren't aware of what all went on with this story, let me just kind of give you the overview of what began to happen, okay? 1,000 planes took off right after midnight, June 6, 1944, moving the first of 24,000 men. There was cloud cover, the one thing you couldn't control. Drops our guys all over the place, except where they needed to be. Some fell into the English Channel. Some fell into countrysides that had been flooded by the Germans and drowned. Some were shot out of the sky as they're falling, literally. Their parachutes didn't even get a chance to open because some were dropped too low. These guys would be scattered over a 25-mile by 15-mile radius. 24 hours later, the people who lived, their commander didn't even know where they were. They didn't know where they were. That's how this little thing got kicked off. And then came the 11,000 planes. That's right, 11,000 planes that were going to bomb everything back to Kingdom Come. Here was the problem. They were afraid of hitting our own troops because they didn't know where our troops were. And then we had that pesky issue of the clouds again. So where did they bomb? Inland. One crewman actually said this. He said, they said we could drop a bomb in a pickle barrel. We couldn't drop a bomb in France. They bombed everything inland, wiped out cows and lots of trees, beaches untouched. Little do our guys know. 5,000 ships make their way across the English Channel. 5,300 ships, 2,000 landing craft, 35 amphibious tanks, new technology. We're going to be able to float them a little bit in the water. It's all going to work out great. And we begin to load our guys, believing that when they get there, there'll be plenty of craters, there'll be places to hide. It'll all work out great. Little did they know every gun emplacement was untouched. The full might of the German military was just simply waiting and held their fire until each one of these boats finally showed up. Whole boats, the moment the front would come down for them to get out, were completely wiped out. Men were told, commanders were told, as some bailed off the sides of these boats in waters too deep no matter what, you're not to stop. You'd have guys yelling out, asking for help, crying for help as boats would make their way by. Some guys would get wounded to the point that they couldn't walk and they'd collapse in shallow water, and as the tide would come in, it would roll over the top of them and they would slowly drown. They found themselves suddenly under such incredible enemy fire that guys were shell-shocked and terrified of what to do. There was no training. There was no plan. The plan went out the window. There was no plan. And in fact, we were this close to none of it even working because the first wave got so wiped out, whole companies, whole squads. No one knew anymore what to do. In most cases, those that were in the highest levels of leadership had already been killed themselves. You had a bunch of privates and lower level people who were supposed to take orders and no one to give them orders. And here comes the second round, the second wave. Now granted, Canada and the Brits, like Sword and Juneau and Gold Beach, they had already taken those beachheads. Utah, we had already gotten on there. Unfortunately, Omaha was the one that we ended up having. Omaha Beach would stretch over, like 100 yards of rocks and mines and barbed wire and undergrowth and all of this stuff. The most firepower directed right there. They unload the amphibious tanks too deep of water. 27 of the 32 sink immediately. 5-guy crews all would drown instantly. Of the 5 that didn't sink, only one managed to actually get to the shore as it was intended to do. No tanks, nowhere to hide, nothing. This is all you have now. Good luck. They were let off many times 100 yards from the shore on Omaha Beach, passing by, bodies laying everywhere, yelling and screaming, people losing their minds, huddled behind just whatever they could to live. See, this is the thing. This is what was going on. We began when there's enough chaos happening around you to believe if you just stay where you are behind this, you'll be fine. See? Doesn't make any sense, but you believe you're going to be fine. If you just hide behind this, we're going to get through it. George Taylor was 45 years old. He was a colonel in the 16th Infantry, 45-year-old guy. He comes up in the second wave, and he sees we're right on the edge of this thing going south. And he makes a profound statement. And he's credited with actually making the first headway, the only path, the first path that got our troops through. And you know what he said when he got on the beach? He said, there are 2 kinds of men on this beach today. Those that are dead and those that are going to die. Get up. Perspective. Suddenly, just by his courage, men that were previously afraid and fearful, something snapped in all of them. Our options are to die here, or maybe we can die over there, but I'd rather die over there if I'm going to die anywhere. Let's take the risk of dying over there. And a few other bold moves that were happening knocks this first gap in this first hole, right? And as you know, we had the beachhead. That was the beginning of the end. You see that? That was the end of Hitler while he was still living. That was the end of evil while he was still in power. Because once we got on that beachhead, and in part by the guts and the bravery and the perspective of life and death, that this man saw this, paved this incredible way, that it was now Hitler was on the clock. It was just a matter of time before the Allied forces were going to march all the way into Berlin. And the rest, of course, is history. But here's the difference. Here's the difference, right? We're not at war. We're not at war. I mean, if we were at war, our cities would be burning for months on end. Right? If we're at war, our hospitals would be overrun. Events in the Capitol, right? If we were at war, we wouldn't see things happen that we haven't seen in 250 years in our history. I mean, if we're at war, usually when people are at war, they take shelter. They take their survival and they hold on to it like grim death, because that's what they're trying to avoid when they're at war. But we're not at war, right? There's no infiltration. Let me tell you something that Jesus understood when he was looking at the Pharisees. He understood that no matter how nasty they were, no matter how evil they were, he understood that there was one standing behind them, far more evil. The father of lies. He understood that what was really at stake was not just life and death in this life, but life and death after this life. Laser focused on what was at stake in his mission to rescue and redeem all creation for all time. You see? When our country, our society, our faith, our economy all feels like it's under fire, I want to ask you if you just could come up for air for a moment and have some perspective of what has happened. If you don't think that your country is under attack, you are not paying attention. And if you think it's just a political fix, an economical fix, if it's this, that, you're still not paying attention. There is an enemy that is infiltrating the country that we know and we love. This enemy, you can be as strong as you want. You can be the strongest person in this room, and you can throw 10 minutes of punches to its head, and you'll tire yourself out. He won't even break a sweat. You can have 10,000 rounds of ammunition in your garage or your bunker or whatever, and go ahead and fire every bit of it at him, and nothing will happen. He won't even flinch. You could drop a nuke on his head. He'll be fine. He's behind splitting Christians against one another, tearing our nation in half, turning followers of Jesus and reducing them to pathetic arguments on social media. This was the threat 2,000 years ago. This is the threat right now. If there's ever been a time to be clear and bold in your faith and in your walk about Jesus, it is right now. But you've got to see the enemy for who and what the real enemy is. Because let me just put it to you this way, okay? There's only two kinds of people that have ever walked through that doorway and sat in this church. There's only two kinds of people that have ever graced these hallways. There's only two kinds of people that have celebrated weddings and baptisms in this church. There's only two kinds of people that showed up to church gatherings and church get-togethers and have been in small groups together. There's only two kinds of people that have ever called this place their home. There's only two kinds of people that have served on boards and committees and volunteered here. It's those that are dead and those that are gonna die. Get up. We don't hide. We don't allow fear to control the narrative, lies and deception about what is at stake. Winning is easy in America. Truth, the soul, Christ being in the center of our country, our communities, our families, our marriages, every aspect of life, there's the battle. There's the war. There's the conflict. And this isn't about following me. I'm as broken as you are. I have doubts that may be identical to yours or worse than yours. I have struggles. Sometimes, just like you, I can be just as guilty of hiding behind this and convincing myself it's going to be okay now that we have this. We have a vaccine. It's all going to be okay now. We have fashionable masks. It's now going to be okay now. Oh, we have a new president. Oh, it's all going to be okay now. Oh, the media said we don't need to worry about it. Oh, it's all going to be okay now. Oh, wait, they said we can go back to school. That must mean it's all going to be okay now. See? When we're under assault, this is when we look to our King, our warrior, and our leader that is Jesus. And I just want to close out with you looking at Revelation chapter 19, because we don't spend a lot of time in Revelation 19. It kind of freaks us out, and the language doesn't always make sense. So let me just look at this picture of Jesus, right? We just did Away in a Manger not long ago, and he's just a cute little baby, right? We love little baby Jesus, and then we love 12-year-old mischievous Jesus that's supposed to be in the synagogue, and he stayed, and come on, mom and dad, lighten up, right? And then we love 30-year-old Jesus because he's got a perm, right, and skinny jeans. He's kind of a hippie, right? And he just tells everybody not to hurt each other, right? He has a flower in his hair. That's how we like to think of Jesus from 30 to 33. That's all he is. And then those mean people, they just beat up on him. Oh, if only he had abs, right? He would have outlasted it. So it's just this sweet little Jesus kind of, we couldn't help it, right? That's how we like to think of this person culturally. So let's just take a quick look, okay, at the world that you're living in, and now contrast that with this description, because you haven't met this Jesus. You haven't met this one yet. And it's Revelation 19. I saw heaven standing open, and there before me was a white horse, whose rider is called Faithful and True. With justice he judges and wages war. His eyes are like blazing fire, and on his head are crowns. He has a name written on him that no one knows but he himself. He is dressed in a robe dipped in blood, and his name is the Word of God. The armies of heaven were following him, riding on white horses and dressed in fine linen, white and clean. Coming out of his mouth is a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations. He will rule with an iron scepter. He treads the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God Almighty on his robe, and on his thigh he has the name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Not only is he the most terrifying warrior, this King Jesus, this warrior Jesus that's going to come back, and kids, don't you dare use this against me, because if I was 17 again, I would use this moment against my parents to get what I wanted. But if you caught a little something that was written in there, he has something written on his thigh. What do we call that? That's right. Don't you go home and go, Pastor said I can get a tattoo because Jesus has one. Don't you dare do that, okay? That's the angle. I see it coming. Mom and Dad, hold your ground, okay? But I am going to tell you, that's a very different Jesus, isn't it? Does he look like he's interested in diplomacy? Does he look like he's interested in your feelings? Does he look like he's going to try to come back and set up a safe space for you and your friends? He's going to come back with one mission, and it will be absolute, and it will be total. Those that have mocked him will reap that day. Those that have undermined him will see him face to face. Every knee will bow, regardless if they want to or not. It will be absolute and total. Nations that have mocked his name, manipulated him for gain, used his name not only in vain, but in such a way to gain power and to manipulate the hearts and minds of nations. They will reap and meet this Jesus. So don't think that your only option is just to get behind a guy with a perm, because you're taking on fire as a nation. And this warrior, this one, not just your friend, not just your Savior, not just the one that could also allow a child to run up and sit on his knee the one that looks at you tenderly and loves you with such a depth of grace and mercy for you and your soul. Not just this one that would trade his life for yours, because there's no greater expression than to die for the ones that you love. This Jesus is also a warrior. This Jesus, between you and him in this time of assault and attack and spiritual war, not against governments and principalities, but of the principalities and the forces, as Paul would say, the spiritual forces, the dark spiritual forces that we are up against. It's Jesus that tells you that he is the life and the truth. It's Jesus that would tell you there's two kinds of people that are going to die. Get up, follow, trust me, and when you trip and fall in this life, warrior Jesus will pick you right back up again. He'll get you to safety. He'll win the war. He'll win the day. Amen. Let's pray. God, we thank you for who you are. We thank you for your power. We thank you that you would see fit. You would come to us in a way as just a baby. You would be this accessible leader, this king that knows us as a friend and as a brother, and yet you have power over all things. God, we thank you that you didn't come to us like Revelation Jesus, because no doubt you'd have our obedience. No doubt you'd have our loyalty, but you wouldn't have our love. You would only have our fear and our respect. You desire the hearts in this room. You desire for us to renew our trust in you. And that may be hard, if not for all of us in this room. We thank you for your grace in advance. We ask that you would pour it out upon us because of your death and your resurrection. You've given us hope and a freedom that no government, no power can take or touch. No conflict in our economy, no issues within our families can touch that which you have given us. We love you. We trust you, our friend, our king, our warrior, Jesus.